Hello and welcome to the Street Crime UK YouTube channel. Please don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Today we look at a gang of London drug dealers who came to Swindon to peddle tens of thousands of pounds worth of heroin and cocaine and who have been jailed. David Bennett, 26, Wayne Blench, 28 and Christopher Render, 24, preyed on local addicts to house them in what is known as a cuckooing operation. Using drugs as payment, they would use the homes of vulnerable users as a base to sell heroin and crack cocaine to locals, forcing their hosts to help in the trade. David Scott, prosecuting, told Swindon Crown Court it is thought the gang were bringing the substances to town from London every other day. The men moved in on users Nuno Louise, 47, who lived on Wilton Walk, and Dennis McName, 50, of Morden Park, to provide them with homes. Mr. Scott said evidence from phones seized shows that they were turning over more than £1,000 a day from addicts on their town streets. The SIM card from the Dirty Line received 250 to 300 calls a day, of which more than 3/4 are assumed to result in the sale of at least one wrap of drugs. He said it also contained the numbers and details of more than 100 customers, making it a valuable asset for dealers. Over the 4 months they were active, between February and May 2014, it is thought 2 kilograms of hard drugs were brought in from the capital. He said that during the 4 months, both properties were raided and drugs were found, on one occasion hidden in the toilet system. When the packages were examined, they were found to have forensic links to the men, who also had been involved in wrapping them for onward supply. Mr. Render of No Fixed Abode, Mr. Blench of Action, West London, and Louise all admitted 2 counts of conspiracy to supply drugs. Mr. Bennett from Norholt, West London, detained the counts but was convicted after a trial. The court was told that all of the men were addicted to the drugs they were involved in supplying. Mike Paulsford for Mr. Louise said his client was not present after fleeing the country to live in his native Portugal. At an earlier hearing, a European arrest warrant was issued to bring him back to the country to serve his sentence. He said that his client had been involved in drug supply before a similar situation where dealers were operating from his home. Passing sentence, Judge Tim Mousley, QC, said there were 2 seizures of drugs, but taken in the round of all the evidence, these represent a pattern of dealing in drugs over a period of time which is put at most between February and May of 2014. It is said drugs were being brought down from London every other day. I am satisfied, certainly, it was more than once a week. That went over a number of months. This is another case where drug dealers were taking advantage of people who were vulnerable to a certain degree by their own addiction to drugs in Swindon. The judge jailed Mr. Bennett for 7 years, Mr. Louise for 4 years and 2 months, Mr. Blench for 4 years and 9 months, and Mr. Render for 4 years. Mr. McName admitted following his premises to be used for the supply and will face sentence at a later date. Taking drugs gangs off the street is a top priority, says Wiltshire Police. Cracking down on city drug dealers who move into county to sell drugs is a top priority for Wiltshire Police, who have backed a national report which recognises that more forces are reporting established activity within their area. The National Crime Agency say over 70% of police forces are now reporting cross-county drug peddling, which typically involves an urban criminal gang travelling to smaller locations to sell heroin and crack cocaine. The drugs will use a single telephone number for customers ordering drugs, operated from outside the area, which becomes their brand. Unlike other criminal activities, where telephone numbers are changed on a regular basis, these telephone numbers have value, so are maintained and protected. The gangs tend to use a local property, generally belonging to a vulnerable person, as a base for their activities, which is often taken over by force, and in some instances, victims have left their homes in fear of violence. Wiltshire Police have backed the NCA's report, which also found that 85% of forces reported there was a dominance of London gangs selling drugs in their area. A spokesman added, unfortunately, dangerous drug networks operating in large metropolitan cities believe that small counties like Wiltshire are a soft target for the expansion of their criminal enterprises. They believe they can travel to our county to sell Class A drugs, bringing with them violence, crime, and antisocial behaviour, blighting the lives of people living within the local communities. Our dedicated crime teams, based in the north and south of the county, are dedicated to intercepting this type of behaviour and will leave no stone unturned as they follow the trails of these criminals back to the county of origin, crossing county lines to ensure justice is done. We have recently had a number of successful results at court, taking drug dealers off the streets and protecting vulnerable people within our society. A recent case includes Jonathan Kalala, 21, of Millward Walk, Ebenezer Badu, 23, of Eltham Palace Road, and Unathan Frezi, 23, of Rectory Field Crescent, who were sentenced to over 6 years each. The NCA say the offenders often employ various tactics to evade detection from police, including rotating gang members between locations so they are not identified, with many using women and children to transport drugs in the belief that they are less likely to be stopped and searched. The crime agency also commended forces after finding that 90% of them are actively working with local partners to safeguard vulnerable adults and children involved in multi-agency work with housing authorities, town councils, public health bodies and charities. Tony Saggers, the NCA's head of drugs threat and intelligence, said, "Given the levels of exploitation of young and vulnerable people that are taking place, we think there could be a real value in finding ways to use the Modern Slavery Act in tackling county lines." Whilst the drugs conviction is often seen as a badge of honour with these criminal gangs, evidence tells us that they attach stigma to a modern slavery conviction. We need to make that work for us. So what are your thoughts about how drug dealers and organisations from the likes of London go to small towns to establish their brand? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, stay safe.